Issei was walking in the middle of a wooded area to reach his destination. The church. The protagonist had his gaze shadowed while the gem on his gauntlet glowed every certain amount of time. Partner, try to control your emotions. It's dangerous to use so many boosts. It's useless to increase your strength so much if you reach over boost. Drake had a worried tone in his words. Issei looked up with a completely serene expression on his face. He loosened his grip on his gauntlet and stopped to see that he was relatively close to the church. Calm down, Drake. I'm fine. I just want to go in with all my power and try to blow them all up without them noticing I'm there. Sorry to disappoint you, boy. But we're not such idiots not to patrol the area when we're about to do something very important. Issei's skin twitched a bit when he saw 3 fallen angels appear among the trees. 2 of them were already known to him. I would appreciate it if you would turn around and leave the place. We don't want to get in trouble with the Gremory family, but for that reason we won't allow you to upset Rainer's plans. He cleared up the fallen angel known as Donaseek. Issei raised his gauntlet as he gave them a piercing look. Why are you doing this to Asia? All she wanted was to serve God and have friends. The 3 fallen angels looked at each other and smirked. I can see that you have become much stronger than in our first meeting. But you still have a long way to go before you can beat one of us. So what makes you think you can take the 3 of us together? Kalrainer questioned, an air of superiority clear to his words. Issei just gritted his teeth as a boost could be heard. He might have been a fool, but not even a mental moron would dare to say that he can handle all 3 without problems. The only thing that pushed him to battle was Asia. After all, he said so himself. He could never forgive himself if he didn't do something about it. Are you still here? Apparently you want to die, don't you? The blonde fallen angel spoke with a slightly macabre smile on her features, although she didn't look very good with how small her body was. He never mentioned that he would be a 3 versus 1. A muffled and apathetic voice was heard from behind the fallen angels, causing them to turn around with a raised eyebrow. Issei recognized that voice immediately, to which he was slightly surprised. What's more, he never mentioned that he was going to fight you. A clearly masculine voice sounded in the environment so that later 4 figures very familiar to Issei appeared. President. Issei exclaimed with great surprise upon seeing the entire Gremory entourage. Rias gave his pawn a gentle smile. Issei, you can continue on your way with Kiba and Kaneko. Akeno and I will take care of this problem. At the president's statement, Akeno licked one of his fingers with a sadistic and seductive expression, making Issei blush a little. But thanks to his recent hormone check, he brushed it off almost instantly. Okay, President. Thank you very much. Rias just nodded with a confident smile as Issei ran past him and his 2 companions followed shortly after, first giving a satisfying nod to his mistress. Well, this will be quite an easy job. The blonde girl exclaimed, totally confident in her victory. Don't get too confident, middled. Remember that we are talking about the Gremory family and their power of destruction can be devastating. Kalrainer warned with a slight frown. Donaseek laughed out loud. I don't care if that brat is from the Gremory family or from some high-ranking family. He said this last with a clearly sarcastic and mocking tone before adjusting her hat with a smirk. We are 3 and they are 2. Besides that she is just a brat. She must not even have awakened the power of destruction yet. We'll see about that. Rias said with a confident smile before looking at Akeno. The woman just laughed in a somewhat strange way and leered at her opponents as she raised her hand. A large bolt of lightning began to form across her palm. At the sight, the 3 fallen angels widened their eyes slightly in shock. Blind jump. Issei stormed into the doors of the church, giving it a big kick and sending them flying. Behind him followed Kiba and Kaneko, who were alert to any dangerous situation that might arise. Issei ran along with his companions while they looked in various directions, not understanding why the place was completely empty. Asia and Rainer were supposed to be here. The 2 of them, and also. Hey, hey, hey. Look who we have here. The 3 companions stopped short when they saw how Fried appeared behind a wall while he gave them his distinguished psychopathic smile. I still have to pay you back for what you did to me last time, you fucking demon. Fried commented while he licked the tip of his sword in a gloomy way. Where is Asia? Fried was a bit surprised by Issei's question because he wasn't paying him the slightest bit of attention. The white-haired man looked back and pointed to a doorway that he led down. The ritual is taking place down there. There are also a lot of priests, but I don't like crowds. You know, he declared with his typical psychotic tone. Issei started briskly walking towards the entrance, not caring that Fried was in front of the entrance. Kiba and Kaneko watched this seriously as they prepared to battle Fried in the worst case. Fried raised an amused eyebrow. Are you ignoring me? Remember that I owe you one for last time. This time I'll make sure to cut you into 1,000 pieces and you'll be reduced to little pieces of shit as it should be. Fried threatened with a chanting tone at the end, while moving his tongue wildly. Freed quickly got in the middle of the path, causing Issei to clench his teeth and clenched his fists. I do not have time for this. Issei yelled, lunging at a speed that Freed couldn't keep up with. A strong red light emanated from the gauntlet as Issei's fist sank into Freed's cheek, causing the subject to cry out in pain and fly away with a spray of blood on his nose and face. His flight ended when he crashed heavily against the benches that were in the place, becoming unconscious. Issei wasted no time and went down with his two companions, only to be shocked by the sight. Or at least, Issei if he was shocked. There were about 40 priests in the place who seemed to be praying to Rainer, while the woman was a few stairs up, next to a cross. Worst of all, was what was hanging on that cross. Asia. Issei yelled loudly, watching helplessly as the blonde was hanging on the cross. Seeing him, Rainer gave a somewhat macabre smile while he played with the gift that Issei had given him. Oh, so you came to witness the death of the nun? In a slightly more normal moment, Issei would have asked Rainer why he was still wearing the bracelet that he had given her on his date. But it was not a very normal situation to say. Why are you doing this to him? Issei stepped forward in great anger, causing the priests to stand in front of him. Rainer looked at him gracefully. Why do I do it? You know that she possesses a very strong sacred gear, right? My boss ordered me to take it for myself, since dark but fun times will begin to arise before long. And he wants to make sure that we are in the highest position when it happens. Boss? What the fuck is he talking about? You know what, it doesn't matter. Issei thought as he looked at Asia with great concern. Before Issei could act, a great scream was heard from the place. Asia. Issei yelled loudly as he watched as the nun screamed in pain loudly. Her being surrounded by a green aura. Rainer would watch all of this in fascination. Issei tried to run again, but the priests barred his way once more. Before any of them could attack him, Kiba and Kaneko charged at the priests, swinging their swords and punching them respectively. Seeing this, the corrupted priests took several steps back, shocked at the strength Kiba and Kaneko had. That action created a path for Issei. Oh, Haidu. We'll take care of it. Kiba declared with a smile. We've got your back, Haidu. Kaneko commented with his typical apathetic tone. Issei looked at both of them, while his eyes shone from being on the verge of tears. Okay. But when we get out of here, I want you both to call me by my name. Issei yelled loudly as he wiped his eyes and ran to where Rainer was. Kaneko and Kiba just assented to Issei's proposal and continued to battle the corrupted priests. Issei stopped dead and watched in horror as the green light began to disappear and with it, Asia's screams. It's already too late, Rainer said reaching out her hands to take a ring that glowed bright green. The sacred gear, Twilight Healing, is mine. With it, I'll be invincible. Rainer would exclaim, spreading her wings and starting to laugh like crazy. Issei didn't care what the woman who deceived him said and quickly approached to release Asia and carried her in her arms. The blonde looked at him and smiled weakly. Issei's eyes began to get teary again, but not a single tear fell. Asia, I'm so sorry if she had arrived earlier. Issei lowered his head a bit and closed his eyes tightly, causing a small tear to escape from his right eye. Issei was surprised when Asia wiped away the tear and then placed her hand on his cheek affectionately. I'm glad I had a friend, Issei. Issei watched in shock as a tear began to trickle down the side of his eyes. Thank you so much for making me feel so happy in just one day. Asia's tear fell and closed her eyes, causing Issei to hug her tightly in great pain. In the end, she had been unable to do anything. But he could still avenge her. A small violet spark stood out inside Issei's soul, causing Drake to be alarmed by what he saw. Issei looked back with great hatred to see if Rainer was still there, but he didn't see anyone. He could only see a large number of black feathers leading to the upper floor. Sorry Issei. We couldn't stop her at first. But she must still be on top, confident of her victory thanks to her newfound power. Kiba declared, a little worried by the great hatred he was emanating from his new friend. It was so weird, even Kaneko was surprised. She's not supposed to have demonic corruption, so it's not normal for a human to have so much hate. Take care of Asia. Kaneko and Kiba looked at him in surprise. But I'll take care of it myself. Kaneko was interrupted by Issei, causing both of them to look at him even more surprised. Issei, she is a fallen angel, and she now possesses a sacred gear. She is much stronger than the priest you faced. Kiba tried to reason with Issei to no avail. I know. It was the only thing he answered as he left Asia in Kiba's hands and began to move forward with great hatred with every step he took. Rainer would be quietly waiting for Ria's Gremory's arrival since she was very confident of his new power. In fact, too trusting. It's beautiful, Rainer said quietly as he eyed the ring on her finger in admiration. His close study of the ring was interrupted when Issei appeared through the door, causing Rainer to look down on him. Oh? Do you still feel like fighting? I'd rather take the Gremory with me as proof of my victory. I'm giving you a chance to save yourself from the demons and you still want to die. Issei slightly lowered his head, not really paying attention to Rainer's words. Although he had only known her for a day, Rainer had been her girlfriend. Even if she had been for a day, he had had a really good time and he had even considered stopping seeing other women having Yuma with him. After all, would he really need to see many women if he can see the beautiful eyes of his lover every day? That's what he had thought. He just wanted to give her love and receive that love in return. Issei really appreciated her. And now it turns out that she not only deceived him, hurt, betrayed, and killed. But she also killed someone she could call a friend of hers, even though he didn't have much time to get to know her. You were my first girlfriend. Rainer looked at her bracelet with mock tenderness. Yeah, from what I could tell, you were incredibly new to it. A guy who hasn't met a woman yet, I'll admit it was all a lot of fun. Issei clenched his fists tightly at the same time that his gaze darkened. She was going to treat you like a queen. Yes, that was very clear to me. For that very reason it was so entertaining to see your panicked face when that dream was broken. Rainer replied with a clear mocking tone, imitating Yuma's voice. Issei clenched his fists even more, causing blood to start coming out of his left hand. I thought ours would be something special. Rainer laughed a sick sound. That's right, it was something very special. I saved your gift to remember the day you died. Rainer played with the bracelet that Issei had given her, emphasizing his words. Really, it was something special, don't you think? Rainer. Issei looked up from him in great anger. Don't scream my real name because you ruined the moment. Rainer yelled with a psychotic grin on his face as he created a spear of light. Issei would dodge the spear of light with great difficulty, making Rainer laugh out loud. Looks like you'll make this a bit interesting. I like that, I won't be bored until your master arrives. Rainer would say as he created another spear of light. She just wanted to have a peaceful life. Rainer gave him a slightly disgusted look. It was funny when they talked about them, but not when he brought in that blonde girl. Do you really think she would have lived a happy life? Ending up dead is the best option. You still don't understand how the supernatural world really works and you'll never have time to understand it. Rainer threw her spear hoping to hit Issei. The man used the gauntlet on him when he saw that he had no chance to dodge it. He managed to block the attack, but it seemed that the gauntlet wouldn't hold another attack. I will avenge her. Issei yelled loudly, making Rainer laugh even more energetically. She was having a lot of fun with the current situation. Making fun of and making her victims suffer was something she loved, those were her sins. That was the nature of her. Avenge her? If you could do it, what use would she be to you? Rainer created another spear as she reveled in the broken expression Issei had. Taking revenge won't bring her back to life, you idiot. Those were Rainer's last words before he threw the spear at him. Everything slowed down for Issei as she looked in complete shock at Rainer's last words. True, what use would it be to her to get back at her if it doesn't bring her back? That didn't mean she would stop hating her or forgive her for what she did. Alone, she didn't want to stoop to Rainer's level. Asia didn't want it to be like this and he knew that she was more than that. Greg watched as the small violet spark merged with Issei's soul, causing her to stand in complete shock. He would kill her anyway, but not for revenge. She would do it to make sure no one else fell for the fangs of such a viper. If you can't give it back to me, he thought to her. Greg felt like a lot of emotions were going through the bear of him. But at first, it was just hate. Now, he wasn't sure how many emotions were being dealt with right now. But the vast majority were not nice. If you can't give it back to me. Issei would widen his eyes as a large red glow completely surrounded him. Rainer watched in shock as the spear of light shattered into 1,000 pieces upon contact with the blinding light. Dragon Booster. The stamina had undergone a small transformation, becoming larger. If you can't give it back to me, I'll make sure no one else has to go through the same thing. Rainer took a step back in complete shock upon hearing the voice of the boosted gear. Ugh. Boost. 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 Issei yelled loudly and rushed at Rainer at incredible speed, hitting him hard in the stomach that made him spit out a large amount of blood. Issei spat out a small amount of blood due to a spear of light having gone through his leg. The protagonist staggered back, causing Rainer to fall to his knees as he coughed up blood. Rainer looked up with a weak psycho smile as he began to heal. I never imagined that you had one of the 13 longinus. But that does not save you from the great pain that runs through your entire body when you come into contact with a spear of light. What are you talking about? Rainer was shocked to see how Issei took off his spear as if nothing had happened and a large stream of blood came out of his hole. The only thing that hurts is the huge hole in my leg. It's exactly the same pain as when you pierced my stomach. Well, it's even a little more painful, Issei would say with a slightly gloomy smile, making Rainer terrified. But how is that possible? You're a low-class devil. You shouldn't be able to move. Rainer's eyes widened in shock. Wait a minute. Just a little more painful. Your body is supposed to be that of a devil now. How come you only feel a little more pain than last time? That's impossible. Not that it's a negligible pain, but the desire to stop you is even greater than all the pain I'm feeling right now. Burst. Issei's gauntlet would grow even larger again, now covering her fingers and forearm completely, causing a second green gem to appear on her gauntlet. Issei took a step forward, not really caring what Rainer was babbling, making the woman look at him terrified and barely get up from the ground. Rainer could only watch in shock. I released the second form and the final form of the boosted Jyanzein just in seconds. What kind of devil is he? She thought in great alarm as she created a spear and threw it at him with all her might. Issei just continued advancing and deflected the spear of light with her gauntlet as if it were a simple fly, making Rainer look at him in complete terror. Kiba and Kaneko were about to leave with Asia's body, but they saw Issei fighting. Just as they were going to join, both of them could see Rias and Akeno in one of the windows, while the Redid shook her head. The two understood the message and went back to hide in the shadows. Rainer turned around and began to fly in terror, trying to escape. Don't think you'll escape. Rainer looked back in horror as Issei had grabbed her foot. The problem wasn't that he had reached her, but how quickly she had. I don't get it. I should be superior to you with my sacred gear. You're an angel, so he flies. Issei declared with contained rage at her words, directing a strong punch at her that made her spit out a large amount of blood. Rainer was thrown towards one of the windows and broke it in the process, being left outside the church. Issei wasted no time and jumped out the same window, only to find Rainer lying on the floor with a very pained face, while her ring was a couple of meters away from her. Issei grabbed a ring and began to slowly move forward until he was in front of Rainer. The woman's eyes widened in terror. Rainer decided to use the last escape card from her. It was very low even for her. But it was the only possible escape route. Issei's eyes widened as she saw how Rainer had transformed into a different person. Issei, please forgive me. I swear I didn't mean to. Please give me another chance. Yuma declared as tears began to stream down her face. Rainer suddenly reverted to her original form, courtesy of Issei. For she grabbed her neck tightly with one hand and slammed her head to the ground, causing Rainer to gasp in pain. Issei sat on top of her legs with a dismayed look. Rainer, I really liked you, I really liked you. I would have done everything possible to make you the happiest woman in the world, not because you are my girlfriend, but because you were charming, shy, attractive, cheerful. You were an amazing woman. Issei tightened his grip on Rainer's neck even more, causing her to spit out some saliva. Issei raised her arm that had the gauntlet slowly with a clenched fist pointing at the woman's face. But that wasn't you. Boost. The treacherous tear escaped Issei as she watched as Rainer tried her best to break free from Issei's grasp, as the pain from her was killing her. She couldn't even think rationally to create a spear. Issei's right arm reached the highest possible altitude. The protagonist looked up at the night sky with a broken smile on his face for a sweet memory. Please come out with me. I guess I'll always be a loser with women. At the very least, I know Mitsuda and Motohama will always be with me on it. Boost. The sound of the boosted gear was the only thing heard for a second. After that, a terrifying female scream was heard followed by multiple crashes that resounded in a disgusting manner. Line jump. So, this is the girl. Rias looked at Asia's corpse with a smile. That's right, President. But it won't do any good to reincarnate her if she doesn't possess her sacred gear. Kiba replied seriously, making the Redid nod with a smile. Don't you think it wasn't necessary to let her die? Considering that we could have created the magic circle in the church, we would have made it in time, Kaneko said as she looked at the blonde's corpse with her typical listless expression. It's something that was necessary. I knew that Issei could release a new power through his feelings thanks to it. Rias clarified, before giving a satisfied smile. Though I never expected him to awaken so much power. He gave the fallen angel a complete beating. Besides that, remember that she might not have wanted to reincarnate as a demon if we rescued her. This was the most viable option. Kiba added with her typical gentle smile. Kaneko nodded in understanding. Now, we just need to bring the sacred gear to revive it. I do not think that it's necessary. Akeno replied as he watched Issei walk through the shattered doors of the church. The queen licked her lips as she saw how Issei had his gauntlet covered in blood, along with part of her upper garment. Having heard the last words, Issei clenched the ring tightly in shock as she watched her friends. Issei quickly looked at Rias with a big hopeful smile. President, does that mean that you can reincarnate Asia if you have her sacred gear? Rias nodded with a smile as he crossed his arms. That's right, or have you already forgotten how we reincarnated you? Issei clenched his fists tightly and gave a huge leap of joy. His joy quickly diminished as his vision blurred, along with a great dizziness that suddenly hit him. Partner, deactivate the boosted gear. Congratulations on reaching the ultimate release, but you still have a long way to go before you can control it without passing out from exhaustion. Star. Issei just nodded and immediately complied, deactivating his gauntlet. Issei, you did an amazing job. I must say, I was very impressed by your performance. Rias congratulated. Issei would fall on his butt to the ground from exhaustion as she gave a thumbs up to Rias, making everyone smile at how the brunette acted. Everyone thought that he would be much more down for killing his ex-girlfriend, but he seemed to be more concerned with Asia's recovery right now. In fact, it wasn't quite like that. Simply, Issei had sentenced his point of view between him and the women when the fight against Rainer ended. But he was much more wrong than he thought, and he was going to find out in the future. Line jump. Issei watched in astonishment as Ria's bishop entered Asia's body. As your new master, I will grant you a new life. Rias finished his spell, making the magic circle under Asia disappear. Issei watched impatiently, waiting for Asia to wake up. Hey? Asia widened her eyes in confusion as a red glow flashed across her eyes for a second. Issei quickly rushed to Asia and hugged her tightly as she started to cry. Asia, thank goodness. Issei suddenly separated a bit. Do you recognize me? He asked, quite worried. Issei? Asked the now confused demon. Issei hugged her tightly again, making Asia smile at her and hug her back. The hug lasted a few seconds since the young woman quickly separated from Issei, something that surprised the young man. Who are they? Asia inquired as she looked at the others. Rias pointed to herself with a smile. I am Rias Gremory. They are all my demon servants. I was the one who reincarnated you so that you would have a second life. You should know that I am your master from now on, and you are a devil. At that statement, Asia shook her head in confusion, but her confused expression quickly changed to disgusted. Issei felt a little bad knowing that Asia was devoted to God, even though she was considered a heretic of hers for curing a demon. He quickly tried to remedy the situation. President, is there a way for Asia to still be able to pray to God? At Issei's question, everyone present twitched a bit, although the protagonist didn't notice it. Well, I don't notice it for a reason. Issei, are you crazy? I will never pray to that idiot again, never. Issei looked at Asia in a state of complete disbelief at the out-of-character response she had given to her. Asia looked around her in clear disgust. Besides, why did they have to revive me in a church? This place is disgusting. Before Asia could say or do anything else, Rias quickly went over to her and touched her on the shoulder. Okay. I'd like to give you some control classes before you continue living in the mortal world. Rias looked back seriously. We'll be at the club. I probably won't be at the academy for a couple of days. Before Issei could protest for an answer, Rias and Asia disappeared through a magic circle. Issei looked at her companions, waiting for an answer. A rather uncomfortable silence was present in the place for several seconds. It's the demonic corruption, Kiba replied, breaking the silence. Line jump. The week progressed quickly. Issei resumed his morning training without much trouble, although things got really complicated for him when it came to practicing with his boosted gear. According to Drake's explanation, the boosted gear had evolved too fast, so now he didn't have a certain mastery over it, and that made his body exhausted very quickly. The only way to improve that situation was with personalized training by someone who knew about sacred gear or who understood how the power of dragons worked, since technically Issei's boosted gear is pure dragon power. He tried to seek help from his companions, but Rias said that he could help him in magical aspects, but not in improving his control with the sacred gear. He also tried to ask Kiba for help, but the blonde told him that when he awakened his sacred gear, he had never had any problem using it. In the end, Drake and Issei concluded to continue improving his physical condition, since that was what was stopping the improvement process at the moment. With the help of Rias, Issei followed a training plan throughout the entire week. Regarding Asia, Issei had hardly been able to visit her at the club these days. Although he was glad that she was okay, his change in attitude made the brown-haired man cool down on his relationship with the blonde. Now, Asia had a much more direct and fiery personality. There were even times when her attitude seemed somewhat sinister. The only sure thing for Issei was that she would never be hers again before, and that was something that bothered him a little. Finally, I come to the conclusion that she tried to convince and warn all the people who want to become devils for what they were exposing themselves to, unless there was no other alternative. If Asia had changed so drastically from such a kind and timid person, she couldn't imagine what would happen to a person with a stronger attitude. In these few days that had passed, normal things also happened. Like Kiba's fan club. The ones marked as the pervert duo, along with a friend of perverts, which played negatively on Issei's reputation, but that was nothing compared to how all the women viewed Mitsuda and Motohama. The only really important thing this week was that Issei found out that there was more than one heir to a great family at the school. This heir was a woman and her name was Sona Citri. She also found out that her pawn was Saji, and he had recently joined her ranks just before the start of school. She hadn't liked the boy very much because of his cocky and stupid attitude. But he quickly assumed that the demonic corruption had corrupted his soul, so in the end, he ended up pitying him. He just hoped that he would eventually learn to control her, so to speak. Line jump. Issei was leaning against his desk with a completely bored look on his face. Right next to him, there was a backpack much larger than what would be considered normal. Mitsuda and Motohama left me again to spy on the locker room. Ah, I'd like to go too, Issei thought, not really paying attention to his thoughts, since they were watching how the girls were gathered at a table, and they spoke of the prince. All the women turned and screamed out of nowhere, causing Issei to cover his ears in annoyance. He decided to look away from him to see what it was about. Speaking of Rome, Issei thought as he watched as Kiba walked in, giving him a completely emotionless look. The women started whispering among themselves when they saw that Kiba sat down right in front of Issei's bench. "What's wrong, Prince Charming?" Issei inquired, looking up at him a little, with a clear mocking tone in his voice. Kiba gave him a nervous smile at his friend's attitude. "The president wants to see you." At this, Issei straightened up and looked at him very carefully. Kiba looked around and began to whisper very softly. "Once a month, a recognized family from hell has a chance to visit the family realm. Luckily, the president and Sona made an agreement that the Citri family entered last month and we entered this month. The president will give you more details." Issei simply nodded in a somewhat absent-minded way as he glanced at the girls behind to make sure they couldn't hear his conversation. "What time?" he would whisper. "In 25 minutes. 25. Is there a problem?" "No, it's just that number rings a bell." Kiba just shook his head at his friend's ramblings and left the place. "Did the familiar kingdom say?" Issei raised an eyebrow internally upon hearing Drake's hesitant tone. "Yeah, is there something wrong with that?" he would ask very curiously. "Anything strange?" "No, not at all. I was just asking. I've never been to that place, but I've always heard some things." The fact that Drake tried to correct her voice made Issei realize that he was hiding something from her. But eventually she brushed it off. Lately, her trust with Drake had increased to astronomical levels, and she knew that if the dragon didn't tell her something, it was for a reason. And many times, those reasons were personal. The clear example is when he wanted to know why Drake and Albion started their eternal rivalry. The dragon simply replied that some things were better without being dug up. Although he promised that he would tell her when he is much stronger. Line jump. "I see, so that woman was your familiar," said Issei while he listened attentively to the explanation of his mistress. The familiar left her female form and turned into a strange little animal with bat wings, then landed on Ria's shoulder. They were all gathered in the occult room where Rias had finished her explanation that he was a familiar. "My idea is to take the two of you to get a familiar. Besides that, this will be a good experience for you to start relating to atypical worlds." "It will be a good experience," Asia commented with a smirk. Rias raised her index finger at him with a small smile. "By the way, Asia, tomorrow you will enroll in Kuo Academy. I think you are ready to enter, but be careful with your actions. I would hate to have to erase everyone's memory because you attacked a follower of God in the middle of one class." Asia would just nod with an enthusiastic smile. She was already looking forward to entering the academy ever since she had come to this place. Rias looked at his two most recent acquisitions with a smile. "Okay, do you have any last questions?" Issei raised his hand and Rias quickly gave him the floor. "How different will this kingdom be?" Rias gave him a sly smile. "It's not something I can explain with my words. You'd better find out with your own point of view." Issei just nodded in understanding. Rias called everyone to stand inside the magic circle and then disappeared. Line jump. Issei and Asia looked around in slight surprise. The sky was a green color, they were surrounded by trees and more trees, not to mention ridiculously huge. You could also hear the noise of flowing water, hinting that there were a large number of streams in the area. To top it off, an extremely humid climate reigned in the place. "It's like a forest," Issei thought, looking in all directions. Omitting the fact that the trees were an ash-white color, along with leaves that seemed to be made of green tea. "Wow. Ooh. The only thing that its inhabitants are not the usual animals," Issei thought with his eyes rolling. "This place is quite nice," Asia commented as she looked around her with a bright smile. "Oh, so we meet again, Gremory girl." They all looked up to see some kind of version of Ash Ketchum, but much more adult. "President?" Issei asked with a confused tone. "He is the one in charge of maintaining order in this kingdom. He makes sure that the demons do not harm the small ecosystem of this place, along with maintaining order among the species that inhabit here, since some are very territorial." Rias explained wisely. "That's right, brat. This place seems endlessly sprawling, but it's much smaller than you can imagine. I need to make sure everything stays in order. Especially since there's nowhere else in hell these friends can move to if their home will be damaged," explained the man who was in the tree. "Hell?" Asia asked in disbelief. Riaz nodded with a proud smile on her face. That's right. The familiar kingdom is located in an extremely hidden place in hell. For that very reason, only high-renowned families know the location of this forest. Before they could continue their talk, a small dragon descended from the air and stared at Asia, causing everyone to be surprised. But the one who was most surprised was undoubtedly the family caregiver. Asia just stared at him for a few seconds with a slightly surprised expression. The little dragon finally stopped studying her closely and leaned his head forward, indicating that he wanted to be petted. Asia didn't hesitate and stroked the little blue and white dragon's back, making the little one happy and start circling around her. Finally, the little dragon landed in Asia's arms with great tranquility, and a small glow covered it for a few seconds, causing a small seal to appear on her abdomen. I can't believe what I'm seeing. As soon as we get here and the lady tames a sprite dragon instantly, being a breed quite well known for being considered a rather surly, territorial, and highly indomitable species. I see that she has a truly extraordinary touch, young lady. The caretaker declared, great astonishment in his tone of voice. Everyone approached Asia and began to congratulate her on her achievement, except for Issei who was going crazy over the place. Greg, what the hell is going on? I don't know if I'm going crazy, but I feel a lot of presences in this place. Issei widened his eyes and looked quickly behind him after feeling a disturbing energy strong but asleep. Partner, calm down. This is completely normal. Since you are a small part dragon, you can sense the presence and power of other dragons for miles. It is an ability that only our species possesses, as others cannot sense the presence, they can only sense the expulsion of magic and power. Furthermore, it not only lets you know their presence, but also allows you to study their state of mind. Although that is already a very advanced level that you may not be able to reach, since you are not a dragon 100%. Drake explained very seriously. The great cold sweat broke out on Issei's face. I understand, Drake. But Issei kept staring behind him as a great aura of icy color rose from behind him. Is it normal for a dragon to possess such a stifling aura and power? Greg. I'll call him Issei. Issei abandoned worrying about him to focus on Asia. He still hadn't congratulated her as she should. Besides, he didn't have to worry. After all, she hadn't done anything to that dragon to make him mad at him. True. Issei, it's a nice name. Issei said as he walked over with a friendly smile. Issei opened one of his eyes and then a large electric discharge left his body and hit Issei hard, making the brown-haired man dance in a funny way. Hey Issei, that's not done. She declared Asia, holding back a laugh. What the hell? Issei asked, already released from the electric dance. The caretaker gave him a mocking smile. Remember what I said. Those dragons are extremely territorial and it just so happens that you are a dragon. Line jump. Hiya. Get it off me. Wait, let's not use magic or all our clothes will fall apart. These things are disgusting. How naughty. Issei would be turned around staring at a tree while he listened to all the party that was going on behind him. I don't have to see, resist the temptation. Tiba swung his sword hard at one of the many slimes in the room, ridding Kaneko of the hideous creatures. Issei, could you help me? Doing all this alone is a bit complicated. Issei turned his head for a second and could see how Ria's and Akeno's breasts were almost exposed. Both women jerked, making their breasts bulge in a sensual way, and if we add the fact that they were covered in slime drool, it gave the scene quite an erotic touch. Pant. Issei quickly turned around and placed his hands on his face to cover his big blush. Come on, Kiba said with a nervous smile. He's a pervert, Kaneko replied with a frown. Kiba continued to eliminate slimes along with Kaneko, but when the situation seemed under control, a small number of them appeared among the trees, falling on top of the women and stripping them completely naked. Hiya. I thought we'd wipe them all out, Kiba mused as he rubbed his cheek with a nervous smile. Issei was about to give in to his sexual instincts and look away, but the caretaker just appeared in front of him. Ahahaha. These creatures feed on clothes, especially women's clothes, so it's normal that they're attacking them like that. The man looked at Issei with a smirk. Though in general, the number of slimes reflects a man's sexual appetite and it's more than obvious who it is. Issei removed his hands from his face in complete disbelief. Are you saying it's my fault? The caretaker placed one of his hands on top of Issei's shoulder. It's not that I'm blaming you, Brad. You're just unlucky to have a libido 15 times higher than normal. I hope in the future you'll be able to control it without any problem. The man gracefully looked at the women drooling. Because so far, you haven't done a good job of hiding it if the naughty little ones noticed your presence. The man moved away from Issei, making the brown-haired man think a little about the man's words. He finally nodded to himself decisively. He had to learn to control his voracious sexual appetite more than anything else, so he wouldn't end up with the same reputation as his two best friends. He knew he couldn't have any luck with any woman because of her past scars, but that didn't mean women couldn't get a good impression of him outside of the realm of love. Although at this point it is already known what Issei's greatest motivation is to stop being a perverted beast. Eyes. Issei changed his determined expression to a little scared after hearing Ria's repressive tone. Assuming the girls were already dressed, Issei turned his head slowly and broke out in a profuse sweat when he saw the suffocating aura surrounding Ria's. Yes, President. I understand that you can't control your sexual appetite and have attracted all those slimes accordingly. But it was too bad that you stood around doing nothing just to see us naked. Ria's declared with a frown. That was very wrong, Issei. Akeno supported Ria's with a seductive smile. Now my whole body feels sticky, silly. Asia added as she rubbed her uniform awkwardly. Perverted, was Kaneko's simple answer. Akiba would just drop a sweat from what was happening. As your mistress, this is something I cannot forgive. If you see us in danger, any kind of danger, you should always help us. Now that was stupid, but what makes sure you don't run away when there's a really tough fight? President. Ria's waved her hand dismissively. Yes, yes. I know you would never do it, but you have to keep in mind that I need to show you my authority so that something like this doesn't happen again. Ria's narrowed her eyes on the last few words, making Issei swallow hard. Tiba, you're a man too, help me, Issei said, giving him a pleading look. Tiba rubbed his hair with a nervous smile. I'm sorry, Issei. But I can't disobey the president. Issei just looked down, completely downcast by his friend's response. Ria's crossed her arms with great seriousness. From what I've learned from you, I know that a physical training-based punishment would only make you happier. And the action you took today isn't serious enough to get your ass whipped. President Issei looked up with a hopeful glint in his eyes. Ria smiled lightly. So your punishment will be to stay here for 3 days. What? Issei yelled loudly at what he heard. The magic circle was formed under Ria's feet. The other servants of hers gathered around her, a somewhat confused look on her face. Apparently, they were not very sure of this punishment. See you on Thursday, Issei. Try not to move around too much in this place, or you might have a problem with the dragons. It's the only territory they have left after the war, and they're overly territorial for that reason. Wait a second. Issei tried to jump into the magic circle, but they all disappeared in her face. I think I prefer the whipping, she finally said as she looked around her with some fear. Blind jump. Ha 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 ha. So, only here for 3 days, huh? That's how it is. Issei and the caretaker were eating a large amount of berries and other fruits. It was obvious to say that those kinds of fruits were not common on Earth, but their taste was still similar. Thank you for giving me some food. Issei gave the man a smile to indicate her appreciation. The caretaker would give him a smirk. No problem, boy. I know you're not someone who has bad intentions, just looking at you I can tell. Issei opened her briefcase and would throw all her books and notebooks on the ground to start putting the fruits. By the way, do you know any place where it's not dangerous to sleep? The man looked up from her with a thoughtful face. Not really. There are no places here that aren't dangerous, although there are places that are less dangerous than others. The man looked down from him with a serious expression. I recommend that you stay in these areas, since they are the least dangerous. The man watched curiously as Issei closed his suitcase and adjusted the position of the backpack they carried on their backs. By the way, what do you have in your backpack? Issei put the briefcase on his shoulder as he gave him a smile. I never go back home after the academy, so I always take a backpack with me, so I have plenty of water and food. Luckily, they'll help me out a lot today. The man gave him a worried look. Don't your parents worry that you're away so long? Issei would give a mocking snort, making the man look at him strangely. Issei would turn around and start walking, raising his hand in greeting. I'm sure they'll be happy not to see a hair from me in 3 days. The man gave him a somewhat confused look, but he decided not to press the subject any further because it seemed delicate. The man snapped his fingers with a smile. I almost forgot to tell you something. To the north of here is a cave that is quite safe. No one dares to go in there because of the freezing temperatures. Issei would slightly change his direction to head north as he pointed at his giant backpack. Luckily, this morning I bought a large number of blankets. The man continued to look at Issei until he finally disappeared into the trees. Anyway, I wonder what it is that place has to generate such a low temperature. The man thought, holding his chin. Blind jump. Issei kept moving through the trees. He could hear the sound of a lot of water and animals to the right of him, so surely there was some kind of lake in that direction. Issei put a goofy expression on his face. I'm lucky to have a lake nearby along with such vegetation. This will come in handy to sustain me for 3 days. Issei put his serious face on again. I just hope my dragon sensor doesn't make an appearance again in these 3 days. I wouldn't want to have to worry about auras in the woods at nap time. Buddy, I don't think the cave is as safe as that bum told us. Issei raised an eyebrow at Drake's hesitant and scared tone. Drake, do you have a thing with this place? Ever since we got here, you've been acting like you're afraid of something or someone. Me? Scared? Ha. You have no idea what you're talking about, brat. Drake replied with a clear tone of superiority. Issei gave a small smile as he looked at his right hand. So what is bothering you? It's nothing, mate. It's something insignificant. Don't worry. Drake answered with a clear confident tone. Issei looked ahead with a smile and continued moving forward. In that case, then there's nothing to worry about. Wait, anywhere but there. Drake yelled with a clearly scared tone. Issei stopped short and a small tick in his eye showed the annoyance he was having at the moment. You know, if you're not going to tell me why I shouldn't move towards the cave, stop picking me up and shut up. Issei frowned and continued advancing faster. Okay, if you don't want to tell me, that's your problem. Issei kept advancing for a few more minutes until he finally went through a tree and watched with great astonishment as the cave loomed about 40 meters from him, showing that the surrounding vegetation was completely crushed by the climate of the place. The cave had a large hole and everything around it was adorned with ice. Before Issei could step onto the ice, Drake finally spoke. It's something from my past, for that very reason I don't want you to go there. Please listen to me, partner. My carriers usually die from the battle against Albion for the most part, but they also die from two other factors. One is because of the Dragon Slayer, and the other one is in this cave. This misfortune is something that has haunted me since the beginning of my battle against Albion. I don't like to remember and talk about my past, but I wouldn't want you to die, being the best bearer that has treated me in this millennium. Everyone has treated me as a source of power, but you are the first to treat me as their partner. So please, I promise I will tell you everything, but I beg you a little more time, since they are hard memories for me, because they are things that will never return. Drake's genuinely sincere and concerned tone made Issei give a very pleased smile at his response. Okay, partner. I understand that your memories of when you were still alive are harsh, but I just want there to be true trust between us. After all, we could live many millennia together. You're right. Thanks for not pushing me, partner. He would thank Drake with a clear grateful tone in his words. Now let's get out of here. Issei lowered his raised foot, stepping on the edge of the ice. The brunette watched slightly surprised as the ice moved away from his foot by magic. Inside the cave, giant eyes of a deep blue color snapped open. At that moment, there was only time for a small whisper from Drake to be heard. Shit. Issei was abruptly dragged into the eye sector by a huge icy dome that surrounded the entire surrounding area, getting trapped inside the site. But what kind of sorcery is this? Issei yelled in shock, seeing the huge dome that was surrounding him. Issei quickly materialized his gauntlet and delivered a strong blow to the column of ice, without scratching it. What is this shit? Issei questioned himself with narrowed eyes as he began to shiver from the cold. We're lost. We went too far, and she noticed us. Drake answered with a very serious tone. Issei blinked twice in surprise. She. The last factor dooming my wielders is a dragon named Tiamat. She is completely insane. She is no use staying here. If you don't go, she will come for us. Wait, what did you do to make her hate you so much? Issei put on a bored look. More personal stuff, I guess I'll ask her. You'll be very lucky if she lets you say more than 2 words that aren't part of your introduction. It was an honor to have been your partner for over 2 weeks. Hey, don't give me up for dead yet, said Issei with a twitch in his eye. He didn't understand why he had to deal with Drake's personal problems, but if he died because of this stupidity, his soul would enter the sacred gear just to kick his ass. Line jump. Issei entered the cave, where he could only see darkness. He continued advancing a little recklessly through the cave until he ran into a current of air that seemed to be a breath. Issei took a huge leap back as huge beautiful eyes of a deep light blue color opened before him. I never thought you would willingly come to your death, Drake. The figure said as he stood up and spread his wings, having such a gigantic size that it encompassed the entire cave. Issei might be a lot more scared right now if it wasn't for the melodious and beautiful voice that came from a huge dragon, leaving out the fact that the tone described the hate of him. After a few seconds, Issei watched in amazement as the entire cave lit up thanks to the ice that adorned it. He was further astonished when he saw the huge 9-meter dragon in front of him. His scales were completely white, except for his abdomen and wings that were light blue, almost as strong and deep as his eyes. And I hope you're prepared for your death, Drake. And if you're not, it's not my problem. The dragon's clearly annoyed tone made Issei snap out of his astonishment. Issei waved his hands in defense with some fear. Wait. I'm not Drake, I'm the bearer of it. Tiamat narrowed her eyes at him, making Issei even more nervous. That's right. Now that idiot is a mere sacred gear, but they are the same scum. After all, you are the security, said the dragon with a clear mocking tone at the end. Scum? What am I missing? Thought the protagonist. Don't call me that, my name is Issei, not Securite. That's just a silly honorary title they give me for having drag. Tiamat's eyes flashed with intrigue for a second. How funny, all the previous wielders I've killed rejoiced at his title like morons. Seeing that the dragon had some interest in a chat, Issei didn't miss the opportunity and pointed a finger at her. Besides, I don't know what Drake did to you to call him scum, but I have nothing to do with his problems. Tiamat glared at him, hinting that he had touched a very sensitive point. So that idiot only rejoices in stories where he achieved great achievements, huh? In fact, he didn't even tell me anything about his life. But I won't answer so as not to miss the chance to get out alive. Issei thought as sweat began to break out from his face, indicating that his superficial calm was slowly beginning to give way. Tiamat brought her face threateningly closer to Issei's, making the brunette a little scared. Not because of her closeness, but because of the pain and hatred in his eyes. I was completely in love with a dragon, along with 2 other females. In our species, it's normal to see males practice polygamy, so I didn't mind sharing it. But soon after, I found out that he only wanted the other 2. And I only saw myself as a trophy for my position. That caused me to fall into Dragon's Fall, a lethal disease that consumes you in a single week, and the only thing it needs to sprout in your body is that you enter into a disaster state of mind. It's an almost incurable disease, but if you get over it, you'll never have to go through it again. Obviously, I wasn't emotionally strong enough to get over it myself, but this is where Drake comes in. He took care of me for days on end to make sure he was okay. As I was healing, I just couldn't help but fall in love with him, and I felt like our connection was very special. But when I finally healed, he abandoned me. I was tracking him for a whole week. Leda, until I finally found it. Tiamat's eyes grew a little teary. In the arms of another. And again, I was rejected. In these moments, Issei's fear had dissipated to become empathy. In fact, she felt great pity for Tiamat because he had experienced something similar firsthand, referring to the first part of the story. Tiamat turned her face away from Issei, and her tears crystallized and broke so that he later gave off an aura of death around her. For that very reason, I swore to take revenge. I took revenge on my former lover and took over this cave in the last millennium to only go out when I felt Drake's presence, only to go and kill him. Tiamat just waited for Issei's response to kill him. He just waited for him to answer like everyone else. You're crazy. You're crazy. Because you are that way, no one will ever love or want you. Don't you feel alone? In those moments, the anger and hatred of the woman passed to a quite secondary plane. What? Issei rubbed her cheek with a nervous smile. I'm just saying, you know. If you wait here for this long to kill Drake, that means you haven't talked to almost anyone in a millennium. Tiamat looked at Issei in great surprise. Well, I guess so. But I never really thought about it. I only had one goal in mind. Issei stopped rubbing his cheek and looked down with a slightly downcast expression. I know what you've been through can be very hard, but it's always good to try to get over it. And talking to people can help you. You know, don't make me laugh. Don't try to feel sorry for me when you have no idea what it feels like. Tiamat roared with great rage at her words. Why do you think I'm a devil? Don't make hasty statements. Tiamat was surprised again when Issei looked up at her with great seriousness, besides that she had yelled at him. How long had it been since someone had yelled at him? In fact, has anyone ever yelled at her? That wasn't really what was on her mind right now. The only thing she was thinking about was Issei's penetrating gaze. Without a doubt, the boy had gone through an experience similar to hers. That means he understands her pain. Don't compare one thing to the other, mate. Your experience was far worse than this dragon's. Tiamat's scales bristled, indicating that she did not want to hear that voice at all. How dare you, how dare you? The dragon roared loudly, causing Issei to be dragged a few meters. Issei collided her hand with her face internally. Right now, he was very angry with Drake. Just when he had a chance to live, he was ruined by his own partner. The large amount of power that materialized as ice began to surround her, giving her a very imposing and threatening image. But Issei had his head elsewhere at the moment. Why are you angry? You don't know what my. Issei was so angry that he didn't even think of his words. They just came out of it. They came from his soul. Shut the fucking mouth, you damn underdeveloped lizard. The stifling atmosphere that Tiamat produced disappeared instantly, making everything go completely silent while the dragon's eyes were as wide as they could be. Hey, I'm defending you. Watch your approach, brat. Drake whispered under his breath with a very offended tone. Obviously, his whisper was of little use since everything was completely silent. Issei just stood there looking at Tiamat. A small icy stream was the only thing heard in the agonizing silent seconds. After that, Tiamat's expression of complete surprise began to slowly soften. In fact, it looked like he was beginning to smile. Ha 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 ha. Tiamat flipped over on the ground as he laughed non-stop and grabbed his stomach with his forepaws. Tiamat began to hit the ground heavily, causing the entire place to rumble. "You and undelved, lizard. Ha 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 ha." Issei couldn't remain surprised by Tiamat's reaction for long, because his voice and laughter were so beautiful when he wasn't threatening you with death that it was simply very easy to get carried away by it. For that reason, he also began to laugh along with her. "I don't like where this is going to lead," Drake said, very offended by what was happening. "President, are you sure about this?" Kiba asked with concern. Everyone in the club looked at Riaz with a raised eyebrow. "Of course I am. It's the only way to get Issei to stop being distracted by trivialities. Can you imagine what might happen if in the middle of a raiding game a woman gets naked in front of him?" Kaneko put a snack to her mouth and looked at Riaz seriously. "I understand your concern, President. But remember that the family kingdom is fraught with danger for Issei. That could mean losing a very important piece to your team." Riaz simply squeezed her hand dismissively. "Relax, nothing will happen to him. And if something were to happen to him, maybe that gets him to change his attitude a little. You should be more careful with those actions, President. I know you can treat him as you like because he is your servant, but remember that you can't afford to lose strength over stupid things. Especially at this time of year." Akeno clarified with a rather serious tone, something out of the ordinary for her. Riaz gave Akeno a penetrating look. She didn't like her servants telling her what to do, but she couldn't help but think that her queen was right. "It's a few months away. If I can get the security to increase its power, it would be a guaranteed victory," Riaz thought with a hand on his chin, then raised his gaze with a smile. "It's still a few months away, so you shouldn't worry about it, Akeno." Everyone else simply smiled at Riaz's response, except for Asia, who didn't understand exactly what he was referring to. "Excuse me, President. But what will happen in a few months?" Riaz gave Asia a very serious look for her question. It was something she didn't like to remember, but she would have to tell him. There was no use hiding it until the last second. Chapter 4. The Decadence of the Dragons. Issei was sitting on the floor and leaning on Tiamat's neck while they were both still laughing, but at a much more normal pace than at first. The dragoness was still turned over on the floor, although she had already stopped hitting the floor hard with her hands. Apparently, the euphoria of the moment was gone. "By dragons, my stomach hurt so much, I haven't laughed like that in a millennium," Tiamat exclaimed as she rubbed her abdomen with one of her paws. Issei looked up with a smile and leaned further into the dragoness's neck. "Whew, I don't think I've ever laughed like this in my whole life." Issei looked into one of the dragoness's eyes that was looking at him piercingly, as if she wanted to study his soul. "I think it was because of your laughter. It's too contagious," Issei said with a huge smile between his teeth, causing the dragoness's eye to widen a little at his words. Issei was a bit confused when Tiamat looked up and her smile changed to a serious expression. At least it wasn't an angry expression, like the one she had at first. "You still didn't tell me your story." This statement made Issei look at her in surprise. The dragoness shot him a glare. "You know, I already told you mine. It's only fair that now you tell me yours." "Anything is better than you continuing to laugh at me," Drake interrupted with an annoyed tone. "Silence, underdeveloped lizard." Tiamat's serious expression curved into a smile after saying those words. Drake grumbled under his breath with nothing in particular to be heard. He only seemed to lament that Tiamat had found his weak spot, and that weak spot was his pride. Issei's deep melancholy sigh caused Tiamat and Drake to leave their discussion for later and pay special attention to the chestnut. "Before we begin, I would like to know, what is life and love to you?" At Issei's question, Tiamat looked up, unable to find an answer. "I don't know. It's not something you can describe physically. You just feel really good and then you want to die." The very out-of-context answer Tiamat gave made Issei shake his head. Issei leaned further against the dragoness's neck and positioned both hands behind her neck with a serious look. "I guess you're right. It's not something that can be easily explained, but they are concepts that are related to each other. To me, life is like a drink, it makes you feel great, but if you try to taste more than you can swallow, it will just kick your ass hard. Regarding love, it's like a drug, it feels amazing, but it becomes incredibly destructive if you don't take the right one or if you become blinded by it." Tiamat looked up with some confusion. "I understand what you mean, but how does life and love relate?" Issei clenched his fists tightly behind his head, something Tiamat noticed. "Because the drug can fuck up your life." Issei gave a heavy sigh and jumped up, turning his back to Tiamat. "That's what happened to me. I tasted love and became completely addicted, I became totally blinded and couldn't see the true intentions behind my girlfriend. She turned out to be a fallen angel and she completely wrecked my life, killing me." Issei folded his arms then turned around with a smile. "But someone helped me and thanks to that person I got a new life. Obviously, it's impossible for my scars to go away completely." Issei put a hand to his heart. In fact, they still hurt. But I won't accomplish anything by regretting it for the rest of my life. If I was given a new life, all that's left for me is to try a new drink and keep moving forward. When I feel like throwing up from getting drunk, I'll just have to endure it. No one has a life without ups and downs, after all. Wow, that's all Tiamat could say upon hearing Issei's story. He had definitely had a much worse time than she had, as not only did the woman betray him, but she also killed him. She was more impressed by something else, though. How can you still be smiling after going through something like that? The dragoness asked, finally rising from her previous position. Before Issei could answer, Drag interrupted. Remember, he was a human, Tiamat. He doesn't feel with the same intensity that dragons feel. Tiamat looked at the talking gauntlet with a frown. You're right, I had forgotten that detail. Issei was surprised at the response, for he thought Tiamat would be mocking Drag again. What are they talking about? Issei asked with great curiosity. Since I see that the underdeveloped lizard is still useless, I'll take it upon myself to explain it to you personally. Tiamat commented seriously, causing Drag to grumble under his breath again. Issei pointed at himself with a nervous smile. Does that mean you don't want to kill me anymore? I pity you. Huh? Tiamat's reply made Issei blink. Tiamat stared at him with her typical serious expression. As you heard. Even though you're not a dragon, I find it amazing that you've been through something similar, even worse than me, and you can still be so happy. Tiam's eyes glowed in a singular way, something Issei picked up on. That made me rethink some things. If a mere human can get over it, why can't I? Tiamat lowered her gaze with a hint of sadness, something that did not go unnoticed by Issei. Besides, I've also realized that this is making me very ill. I will never stop hating Drag. But like you said, the hatred has so permeated me that I've been alone for a millennium. I guess when you told me that, it really hit me. Am I really going to spend the rest of my eternity hunting that jerk? I thought. Drag rolled his eyes at the last statement. But he opted not to say anything, as Tiamat was having a very strong reflection right now. Issei folded his arms, directing a chuckle at her. It's great that you think so. Tiamat directed a small smile at Issei, only to have a large glow surround her. Something that impressed the protagonist greatly. Before we begin, I'd like us both to make ourselves comfortable. The icy glow surrounding Tiamat disappeared, causing Issei's jaw to drop in complete shock. Now, the large powerless dragoness had changed her figure to that of a mature woman with a slightly taller stature than Issei. She was wearing an all-white shirt, along with jeans of the same color that tightly squeezed her legs. The shirt was missing a button at the top, revealing a small cleavage that revealed her large breasts. Worst of all, her breasts looked incredibly firm and soft, they were even bigger than Ria's, and that was very easily noticeable. Even so, her legs and butt were not far behind at all. In fact, you could even say they were sexier, as she had a large but moderate butt that clung tightly to her jean, giving the image that it was very moldable. Just like her thighs that seemed to be completely fleshy and soft, just like her butt and breasts. But, the really amazing thing about all of this was that her body fell short of the beauty that her face gave off. She had creamy skin that was beautiful, along with a softness even higher than wool. Her face looked like it had been carved by the gods themselves, along with her deep blue eyes and beautiful expression, which gave off a breathtaking seriousness, making everything around her give her a mysterious touch. Her hair was of a lighter light blue color than her eyes. Her hair moved freely and with great grace until it reached below her waist. It looked incredibly silky and shiny, giving off another great aura of loveliness to her entire body. Wow, Issei just stared at her with wide eyes. The most beautiful woman he had ever met by his standards was Ria's, and this woman made the Redeed look like the ugliest woman in the world. Tiamat crossed her arms under her breasts and raised an eyebrow. Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something wrong with my face? Issei took a step back as he continued to admire her beauty. It's not that. It's just I didn't know dragons could shapeshift. Tiamat raised both eyebrows at the response. You don't know that dragons have human form? Tiamat put her hands on her hips and gave a big sigh, then looked up with great seriousness. Will be quite a while. Issei snapped out of his trance and directed a chuckle at her. In that case, Issei tossed a large backpack forward, causing Tiamat to raise an eyebrow. Line jumped. Delicious. Tiamat thought after taking a bite of the sandwich prepared by Issei. A small pleasant smile came across her face, showing her small canine teeth on the outside, giving her a rather tender appearance in Issei's eyes. They were both sitting across from each other on a blanket, simulating a picnic of sorts. They were at the exit of the cave, the ice had already disappeared, courtesy of Tiamat, because Issei was shivering with cold a few moments ago. Tiamat set her sandwich aside and returned to her serious expression. Well, what do you want to talk about first? Issei looked down at her sandwich with a thoughtful look. I'd like to know first why dragons have a human form. Did you pay attention to my body when I was a dragon? Issei simply nodded. So, I guess you remember that I didn't have any reproductive organs, right? Issei looked down with a small blush on his face. I hadn't noticed in such detail. Issei looked up in surprise. Wait a minute, you're telling me that? Tiamat nodded seriously. That's right. We dragons always resort to this form when it comes to reproducing. It carries a danger though, as our powers are reduced by 30%. Issei turned a sheepish smile on him. So, how do you guys take care of your babies? Tiamat bowed her shoulders. My mother never explained it to me, and I've never had a child either. In fact, I've never even had sex. A small awkward silence rose between the two, even making Tiamat nervous. The other thing you wanted to know, was it about dragon emotions? The dragoness's question broke the awkward silence, causing Issei to nod quickly. Basically, we dragons are the most sensitive species there is regarding feelings. Just so you understand, if we feel joy, we feel it 10 times more, if we feel passion, we feel it 10 times more, if we feel sadness, we feel it 10 times more, if we feel hate, we feel it 10 times more. In fact, it is for this very reason that the fall of the dragon originated, because we enter into a state of depression so great that we end up dying because of it. The good thing about this is that it can only happen to you if your body is subjected to a great deal of emotional stress. It also has one factor in its favor, and that is that if you suffered it once, you become immune to the disease because your body has already adapted to the conditions it suffered before. But that doesn't mean you won't feel devastated if you go through something similar again. Issei rubbed his hair in surprise. Okay, that sounds very complicated. Tiamat looked at him seriously, causing Issei to become a bit elated. You don't have to worry about it. Only dragons have these characteristics. You have underdeveloped lizard, but you're still a demon. You may acquire some dragon abilities and even have dragon aura, but you won't be a dragon. Unless you want to try, but I don't recommend it. Issei watched Tiamat with great curiosity at the last mentioned, but said nothing about it. In fact, you'd have to worry more about yourself. After all, being a demon doesn't guarantee you eternal life. You still have to face the other celestial dragon, and that's not the only thing you have to worry about. Tiamat frowned, causing Issei to pay special attention. There's also the Dragon Slayer. Issei blinked in surprise at hearing that name. From your reaction, I can see that you've already been told something about it. Tiamat grabbed the sandwich and took a bite, then lifted her gaze to remember. He's a very dangerous subject. He was created by the 3 factions a millennium ago to wipe out all dragons. It is true that to us, demons, angels, and fallen angels are nothing more than cockroaches, with exceptions. As she said that last word, a shadow of a woman appeared in Tiamat's mind that had about 10 black wings with piercing red eyes. The problem is that even if they are cockroaches, if you put the power of the 3 factions together in one subject, it makes it somewhat problematic. That's how brand congealment came about, an experiment that served to eradicate all the dragons below the Dragon Kings. Very few survived. Even 2 of the 4 great Dragon Kings died at the hands of those scum. Brand was the main dragon slayer, and if it hadn't been for him, they would never have been able to kill 2 of the strongest dragons that ever lived. Dragon Kings? Issei asked with great intrigue. Tiamat gave him a somewhat proud look. That's right. We dragons are a species that has a great deal of level difference between us, for that very reason there are scales. In the 5th scale, there are the weakest and least intelligent dragons, known as dragliers. Thanks to them is that the species still has a chance to survive, but being so weak they became the relatives of the demons in exchange for living in this place. In the 4th scale are the dragons, here you could find weak to very strong dragons. In fact, Brand was the one in charge of killing the strongest of that scale, since not even the demon kings could take care of them. Unfortunately, each and every one of them was killed. In the 3rd scale, there are the dragon kings. Unlike the previous scale, these dragons have an enormous power, a rarity even within the dragons, and for that reason only 4 dragons managed to reach such a level. Something curious to note was that although they were classified with the same title, there was a great difference in power among the 4. Because of this, the 3 factions joined together with Brand to defeat Vitra and Fafnir, the 4th and 3rd Dragon King respectively. But as they saw that they could not defeat the 2nd Dragon King, Tannen, they all agreed to make a pact with the dragon, giving him lands of hell in exchange for peace. But not everything was rosy for them, as Brand defected from the 3 factions upon seeing this and is currently wandering around to find and kill the bearers of Drag and Albion, although he now also poses a danger to the 3 factions. Basically, killing dragons is his only ambition in life. Wait a second. You're telling me that the Dragon Kings were so strong that the 3 factions had to ally to defeat them, and even then, they couldn't handle the 2nd strongest. Tiamat smiled proudly at her genuine surprise. That's right. In fact, they might have been able to take Tannen if God helped, but apparently he didn't take part in the fight. Supposedly he had been greatly weakened after sealing Trihexa and the 2 heavenly dragons. Which by the way, Albion and Drake belonged to the second scale, which would be the heavenly dragons. They were so strong that it would be cheeky of us to classify them as dragon kings. Issei raised an eyebrow in confusion. Wait. If the two heavenly dragons are stronger than the dragon kings, how come they lost? We didn't lose. Drake interrupted. We simply got overconfident since we didn't know that God had some items called sacred gear and that he could seal a part of our soul in it. Tiamat looked at the gauntlet with a smirk. You didn't defeat them, but you did lose. Otherwise, you wouldn't be talking through a gauntlet. Face reality, underdeveloped lizard. Tiamat widened her smirk even further as she listened to Drake grumble under his breath. Tiamat turned her serious gaze to Issei. And before you ask, Trihexa was sealed thankfully. But it also took the dragon god by surprise, and it took the help of all the faction leaders to get it sealed, and I'm not just talking about the 3 factions, I'm talking about all of them. Trihexa was a global threat, so everyone had to participate. Still, the only option they had was to seal him in a dimensional prison. Issei blinked in surprise. How did you know I was aware of the dragon gods? Tiamat flashed him a tiny smile. I figured. The underdeveloped lizard is not such an idiot that he would forget to tell you something so important. The dragon gods are power at its finest. There are only 3, though there is a rumor among the dragons that a 4th exists. At this, Issei looked at her with great interest. Big Red, the dragon god of sleep. Office, the dragon goddess of infinity. Trihexa, the dragon god of hate. And finally, there was said to be a dragon god of rage. But it has been a long time and he has never appeared. It's bullshit as far as I'm concerned. Tiamat took a last bite of her sandwich, rising from her comfortable seat. That's it. Yeah. Issei replied, absorbing all the information he had gained. Tiamat changed her typical serious expression to a small smile, revealing the tips of her fangs. It's been entertaining getting to know you. I hope you have a safe journey. Tiamat raised her hand. Issei directed a chuckle at her, shaking her hand. Likewise. It's been a bit of a scary experience at first, but then it's been fun. Tiamat covered her mouth with her free hand and began to laugh, leaving Issei delighted by her beautiful melody. Sorry about that and thank you. She said with a very grateful tone at the end. Issei was touched by her sincerity at the end, but didn't comment on it. Fairly well. Issei said, letting go of Tiamat's hand and quickly turning around to carry his backpack, not noticing that the dragoness had been staring at his hand longingly. Issei finally left the spot as she raised her hand as a gesture of greeting, without looking back. Issei's contented expression changed to one of complete shock. Friend? He thought internally. I know what you're thinking, mate. And I must tell you that Tiamat is the most beautiful dragon that ever lived. How could that jerk hurt her? Didn't he have eyes to see the incredible beauty he had in front of him? She was even willing to accept other women, as long as he kept loving her, but no. Thought Issei clenching his fists tightly. I get it, if at those times I hadn't fallen in love with Delia, Greg? Issei asked worriedly seeing that his friend had stopped out of nowhere. Nothing. It's just that I remembered something very funny. Issei simply nodded in compression. Partner, won't you stay with her? Greg's worried tone quite impressed Issei. I don't think it's necessary. Besides, why are you worried about her? She's killed some of your bears. True. But she's my kind, and I can't help but feel sorry for her. Greg thought the brown-haired man rather surprised by his companion's attitude, then gave a huge chuckle. You don't have to worry. She seemed really strong, so I don't think she needs my Issei turned around to give him one last look. Company? He felt stupid. Tiamat was still at the exit of the cave. The wind made his hair blow freely down his body. She had a serious and calm expression. But the look of her. Her gaze showed only a feeling. Loneliness. Hatred has so permeated me that I have been alone for more than a millennium. The memory of Tiamat's words made Issei clench her teeth tightly. How had he been so callous and stupid? Tiamat's eyes widened in surprise to see how Issei was returning with her hand raised in greeting, a nervous smile on her face. Did you forget something? Tiamat asked with a raised eyebrow. Issei looked away and rubbed his hair in embarrassment. Not really. In fact, I had come to this place to stay here in the beginning, and? Asked a dragon, raising her eyebrow even more. Issei finally met her eyes with Tiamat's. Well, I was wondering if I could. Yes. If you can stay. Tiamat interrupted Issei with great enthusiasm as she clasped both her hands under her breasts tenderly from her. Issei blinked in surprise. Really thank you very much. He responded with a big smile at the end. For 3 days, huh? Tiamat asked as she sat down across from Issei. The young man rubbed his hair in disgust. That's right. And it was all just because of stupidity. Issei would give a big tired sigh. Anyway. Now it's something that doesn't matter. He opened his backpack and took out a couple of sandwiches, along with the fruits he had received earlier from the caretaker. It was already evening. Issei had told him a bit of his story of what he had done once turned into a demon. He omitted to talk about his companions, though, as Tiamat seemed rather reluctant on the subject. Apparently, she still held a grudge as did Drake for what happened in the past, although her partner hid it very well. Tiamat grabbed one of the sandwiches and looked at it seriously. Tomorrow we'll have no choice but to forage for food. Is there something wrong with that? Issei asked with some amusement as he watched Tiamat sketched a small smile as she tasted the food. Apparently, she had a weakness to food, or at least, her food. Tiamat flashed a small smile at her, showing the tips of her fangs. You may not have noticed because you're not a dragon, but the area is home to a fair amount of dragons, I can sense them by their aura. Tiamat took a bite of the sandwich, making her smile a little more visible. They are very weak. But keep in mind that I couldn't even sense your presence, so you're even weaker than they are. Thanks for the compliment. Issei replied completely dejected as he watched Tiamat happily eat her dinner. Issei rested his cheek on his hand as he watched with a small smile as Tiamat thoroughly enjoyed her meal. After a few seconds, Tiamat finally noticed his gaze and raised an eyebrow to him in response. Something wrong? Issei just shook his head in amusement. Nothing, just that when I get back to my place, I'll treat you to a real dinner. Tiamat widened her eyes at the aforementioned, making Issei nervous. Though you don't have to if you don't want to. Clarified the protagonist, rubbing his hair. Are you seriously going to invite me to your house? Issei was taken aback by the great enthusiasm Tiamat showed with her words. The woman was looking at him very seriously, but her eyes and tone of voice showed great restrained excitement. Issei just smiled at her, of course. I don't see anything wrong with it unless you want to go somewhere else more ostentatious. Ostentatious? Tiamat asked with great curiosity in her words. For humans, what's a swanky place? Issei picked up a stick nearby and began to draw a restaurant on the outside of the sheets that made a picnic. This is a more ostentatious place. It's kind of expensive, but you'll eat a delicious dinner made by a person who specializes in it. Boring. Tiamat said with a rather funny expression. Issei watched Tiamat with a raised eyebrow, then gave her a smile and erased the drawing she made recently. She began to carve a new drawing. Then, we could go to a place where we can make our own food. He stated as he drew a park. Tiamat would rest her face on her knees as she looked at Issei with great interest. At this, Issei chuckled a little. You like that idea a lot better, don't you? Tiamat dropped her apathetic expression to the side to give him a small smile as she nodded. Without realizing it, they had both set a date for a date. Friendly date or not, it was still a date. Issei winked at her with a proud look. You'll see, I'll cook you something much better than this. Sounds very tempting, Tiamat said with a slight smile. They both finally finished dinner after a friendly chat. Now, the night started to get extremely cold and they both decided to create a fire inside the cave so they wouldn't freeze to death. Issei put on the 2 blankets he carried in his backpack, breathing a big sigh of relief as he sat down and made himself comfortable near the fire. Tiamat just sat near the fire, right at the other end where Issei was sitting. Minutes passed, Issei was about to fall asleep, but he could catch something a little sad out of the corner of his eye. Tiamat was hugging herself while shivering with cold. Issei was immensely surprised by what he was seeing. Tiamat. Tiamat raised her gaze in intrigue after hearing her name. How can you be cold? Issei asked somewhat worriedly as he pulled back the blankets from his body a little to fully reveal his face. Tiamat directed a smirk at him. I'm sorry, but I'm not immune to cold. My power may be ice and ice may be what shelters me, but I can't use my power because I might freeze you. You know, it's like someone with fire or lava powers. Even if your body is surrounded by its own flames, it won't do anything to you. But external heat can still affect you. Unless his power works differently than mine. Issei lowered his gaze in grief. That means you're getting cold because of me. Tiamat would look at him very seriously. I've been through much worse, so you shouldn't worry about me. Tiamat lowered his gaze again as she started rubbing herself again to get rid of the cold. Issei watched all of this rather pitifully. Finally he shook his head and smiled. Tiamat still had her eyes closed as she rubbed her body in an attempt to warm up and fall asleep. Suddenly, she felt a wave of awesome warmth invading her all over her body. She opened her eyes in surprise, only to see that Issei was pressed against her as he used the 2 sheets to cover them both from the cold. Issei hugged the woman around her waist, pulling her even closer to his body, causing the dragoness to rest her face on his shoulder. She clung a little to the blankets as she closed her eyes to feel the physical warmth embrace her completely. It felt amazing. Much better, isn't it? Issei inquired with a smile as she closed her eyes to sleep. Tiamat pulled her body a little closer to Issei's as an imperceptible blush appeared on her face. Thank you. Line jump. Tiamat stretched her body as she absorbed the icy blizzards coming from outside. Are you sure about going out? Dragons are quite territorial, they could hurt you. Tiamat warned, looking sideways at Issei with her typical apathetic expression. Issei directed a smile at her. Don't worry. I really want to get out and explore this place a bit, and I don't like the idea of you alone doing all the work. Tiamat looked straight ahead as she bent down for a stretch. As you wish. Issei looked away with a small blush due to Tiamat's butt pressed tightly against her white jean. Besides, this might help me get stronger. Stronger? Thought Tiamat seriously. Tiamat placed her hands on her hips and turned around to look at Issei seriously. Meet me back here in an hour. Issei just nodded seriously, only to be taken aback as Tiamat suddenly disappeared. Issei squeaked in surprise. She's really fast, partner. Drake chuckled a little under his breath, getting Issei to look down at his gauntlet with a raised eyebrow. What's so funny? Nothing, nothing. It's just, you still don't know a lot of things about her, Drake replied with an innocent tone. Whatever you say, Issei replied with disdain. The only thing that bothered her about Drake was that he kept things from her, but he wasn't going to force himself on her either. All in all, he knew that sooner or later he would find out everything. Blind jump. I think this one will do. Issei said to himself as he took a fruit that resembled a banana from the top of a tree. Since those trees were gigantic, I don't think it's necessary to state that Issei was a few feet off the ground. Issei's smile changed to a surprised look when a shadow passed over his head. Partner. I understand. Issei stated seriously. I'd better get the hell out of here before I. Issei took a big leap and screamed as he was attacked by a blue-colored dragon that was about his height. The young man landed face first on the ground and quickly got up while rubbing his face in irritation. He didn't have time to insult the dragon as he activated his gauntlet and the sound of boost echoed through the place while he dodged another dragon very similar to the previous one by the skin of his teeth. The two dragons stood in front of Issei, giving him a huge roar. Issei put his gauntlet in front of his face and the word boost resounded again. They seemed to be very angry. He said as he looked at the two dragons very seriously. I don't know what happened, but they came straight for you. It's obvious that something has them very upset. Stardrake stated seriously. What should we do? Issei asked as she took a step back as she watched the dragons begin to slowly approach menacingly. Negotiating in this situation is ridiculous. We're not in their territory either, so they're angry about something else. They will not only come to harm you, but to kill you as well. So? There's only one option, run. Issei turned around and started running at full speed. Issei rolled on the ground to dodge two magical attacks that passed over his head and impacted against two trees, causing both trees to start falling. Both dragons reached Issei very easily and both tried to attack him while he was still not recovering from the previous attack. Luckily, he was just in time to defend himself with his gauntlet, plus both attacks hit in the same place. But the dragon's strength was much greater, so his gauntlet was severely damaged and he hit himself in the stomach from the pressure they exerted on him, causing him to spit out some saliva. Fortunately for him, the two dragons had to leap backwards as the two trees came crashing down on him, trapping Issei underneath. Both dragons widened their eyes as the dust disappeared from the scene, the fallen trees generating an X. When they looked around for Issei, the brown was no longer under the two trees. The dragons roared loudly with great anger and looked everywhere, then began to fly away. Issei was hiding behind a tree as he clenched his teeth tightly with some fear. He could only watch as his hand where his gauntlet previously was had about 3 claw marks that were making him bleed a little more than could be expected from a wound that had been mostly blocked. Damn, that was close. Thought the chestnut as he looked at the two trees that were about to fall on top of him. Let's get the hell out of here before they find us. And make sure you don't use the sacred gear or it might alert them to our presence, Drake warned wisely. Issei just nodded seriously and started walking in the opposite direction the dragons had gone. Blind jumping. Issei watched with a small smile as many exotic animals were playing in the forest with each other. There were all kinds of species. This is a good sign. If there are so many familiars in one place, it means this place shouldn't be dangerous. That's good to know. Issei replied as he rubbed the wound on his hand with a small grimace of pain. Wob. Issei raised his gaze in confusion after hearing a cry come from the peak of a tree. The chestnut rolled his eyes as he saw how a small dragon was upside down because of some vines that had trapped it. It had small scratches all over its body. The clues indicated that it had ended up in that condition because it didn't know how to fly properly yet. Should we help him? Issei wondered, rubbing his cheek with a finger. He's not a baby dragon, but he's still very small. He probably won't want to accept your help at first because he's another dragon, but he's still very weak anyway. Issei became serious. How weak? I think they're close relatives of the dragon sprite, to give you an idea. Issei rolled his eyes. Like that little demon that's now Asia's familiar. Do you know how bad I had a hard time with his blue lightning? Issei angrily grumbled. Would you let a dragon child bully you? Drake asked with grace in his words. With other carriers, he would take this reaction as worrisome due to the fact that it could affect his image. But Issei was Issei. He couldn't take his fearful attitude seriously, being that he faced Tiamat herself. Although, come to think of it, maybe he would have been afraid if he had told her who Tiamat was in the first place. In fact, he still found it odd that she hadn't told him herself. Drake snapped out of his thoughts when he saw that Issei had his hand a few inches away from the dragon as he tried to untangle the vines. Got it. Issei tore off one of the vines that was holding the dragon's mouth almost completely shut. Seeing this, the little dragon's eyes gained a dangerous gleam and it looked very piercingly at Issei, causing him to become confused. From one moment to the next, the blue-colored dragon opened its mouth and spewed out one great flame after another. Issei began to scream and dodge all the attacks with better maneuvers than those demonstrated in circuses. Finally, a strange sound was heard from the dragon's mouth and some smoke came out of its snout, indicating that it had run out of magic. The dragon fainted from that very thing. Seeing this, Issei smiled triumphantly. How'd you like that, you little bastard? Issei changed his expression to a confused one, seeing that the angle at which he viewed the dragon had changed quite a bit. His face turned blue and he started sweating profusely as he realized that the tree he used to climb was in front of him. Aye. Issei tried to fly by waving his arms in vain, falling face first to the ground. Issei dug his face off the ground with a bit of difficulty, raising his face while drawing a completely bored expression on his face. That's twice now that this has happened to me this day and I've barely started the morning. Issei snapped out of his internal argument when he saw that the flames of the little dragon had somehow reached out to touch the vines and as a product of that, the little dragon might face a painful fall. Issei quickly got up from the ground and took a big leap forward, grabbing the little dragon with both of his hands. The dragon opened one of its eyes with great exhaustion, seeing that Issei had saved it. The chestnut was surprised when his new friend gave him a weak smile. Issei settled down to sit on the grass as a few family members surrounded him and looked at him with great attention for what he had demonstrated earlier. Greg, should we do something to get him healed? Issei asked, somewhat concerned about the little dragon's apparent condition. No, partner. He just had a lot of magical wear and tear, that's all. The other wounds are very superficial. You can leave him here no problem, I'm sure when he wakes up he'll go looking for his parents. Issei rubbed his hair with a worried look. It's okay. After saying those words, Issei gently supported the dragon on the ground, then set down one of the fruits he had gotten so far. Issei turned around to leave, but was surprised when he felt how the little dragon had clung to his back as he ate the fruit he had given him. Wasn't it going to be a while before he woke up? Issei asked with great surprise. Greg chuckled to himself as he understood what was going on. Apparently he hadn't run out of magical power. He had simply gone too long without eating. Issei shook his head in amusement, then handed him another fruit he was carrying in his backpack, causing the dragon to smile amicably. It's alright, friend. I hope you're feeling much better by now. Issei commented with a smile as he watched the little dragon eat the fruit, gladly. Let's go now or we'll be late. Stardrake declared seriously. Issei widened his eyes slightly in alarm. That's right. Tiamat said to meet him at the cave in an hour. Issei turned around and started running, without first giving his new friend a smile. I hope you have luck finding your parents. The little dragon could only watch as Issei began to disappear into the trees. He didn't hesitate for a second and started to follow him as he flew. Blind jump. Won't you stop following me? I thought dragons were totally reluctant to hang out with others of the same gender. Issei would ask with a roll of his eyes. That's right. But this dragon isn't male. Issei began to sweat nervously as he would glance back sidelong to see the now identified dragoness. That means. Greg was shocked at the thoughts that raced through Issei's mind. What, of course not. They may be of different gender, but they take a great amount of years of evolution with them. Issei put a hand to his chin at that answer. It's like it's between monkeys and humans. Exactly. I think the only dragon you could fixate on as your lookalike is Tiamat. But I'm sure that would be a bad idea. Issei widened his eyes slightly at the statement. That's right, I have to hurry. Shit, they detected us somehow. Immediately after saying those words, Issei stopped in his tracks as he saw the two dragons that had caused him trouble earlier appear from the sky and fall in front of him with a very angry expression. Issei gritted his teeth hard at the sight of the two dragons and immediately stepped in front of the little dragoness to make sure she was not harmed. Both dragons looked at each other confused by what they saw, then looked at Issei again. Issei blinked in confusion. What's wrong now? The little dragoness would poke her head over Issei's back and give a happy snort, then fly happily towards the two dragons. The two older dragons greeted the little girl with a few small tears at the edge of their eyes, hugging her tightly with their wings. What did I miss? Wondered Issei, really surprised to see how everything took such a drastic turn. I never would have thought that those two were her parents. Issei could only watch as the little dragoness was pointing at him and talking very cheerfully in a language he didn't understand. But he was sure that his little friend was telling her parents how they met and how she was saved by him. When the little dragon finished telling her story, the two older dragons looked at Issei with wide eyes and a blush of embarrassment on their cheeks. The two dragons quickly moved closer, causing Issei to activate his gauntlet just in case. But he was surprised when one of the dragons gave him a deep bow while the other hugged him tightly. Issei blinked in confusion and all he could do was reciprocate the hug. What the hell is going on? He wondered internally. In short, the little girl told them how you saved her. As a token of gratitude, the male dragon knelt before you, implying that you have their respect to socialize with them whenever you want, despite being a male dragon. Well, the female is just thanking you, Drake explained in a rather calm tone as he saw that the situation did not get out of hand. I see. Issei thought as he rubbed his hair with one hand and continued to pamper the dragoness with the other. In the end, the whole slightly absurd situation had only made Issei fall behind with her work. Line jump. I'm 15 minutes late, Issei thought very nervously. Maybe it wasn't that long, but Tiamat had proven to have a very strong temper in the short time they had known each other. As he walked along, the three dragons followed behind him as they watched through the air as the cave that was always frozen was now not. Although there was still a threat with an impressive aura in that place. They had only one question in their minds. How on earth could Issei go there without being annihilated? Although, it was also true that it was impossible that a dragon of his own rank could have such a powerful aura. That could mean that this dragon is more civilized than them. Issei crossed the last tree that blocked his view to see the empty path that led to the cave. A few meters away from him, Tiamat was waiting impatiently. As soon as she saw him, the dragoness quickly turned to him with her typical apathetic expression. Issei looked down nervously as he tried to explain himself. I'm sorry, but a lot of things came up and somehow. You're fine. Issei widened his eyes as he felt Tiamat wrap her arms around him in a hug, resting her face on the chestnut's shoulder with a bit of regret. Issei simply said nothing and reciprocated her embrace, still with surprise still in effect on his face. Tiamat turned her face away slightly to look at Issei, revealing a genuinely worried expression. Since you took so long, I thought something had happened to you. She clarified as she cupped Issei's cheeks with her hands. Issei directed a goofy grin at him. Thanks for worrying, but I'm great. He held up his thumb for emphasis on his words. In these moments, that's when Issei realized that Tiamat didn't just possess a serious, strict and bloodthirsty personality. In fact, having been so long with great hatred in her heart may have caused her other emotions to be buried within her being, but that didn't mean they wouldn't come out again. Tiamat turned her face even further away from Issei and grabbed the brown man's hand with both of her hands, giving him a piercing look. Who did this to you? Issei winced slightly as Tiamat began to stroke his wound with one of her hands. Tiamat looked up with eyes that indicated suffering, causing the three dragons flying a few feet away to tremble in fear. The dragoness stopped caressing Issei's wound, making the chestnut brown impressed when the pain disappeared and a small column of ice covered his wound. He quickly began to feel the cold burning, but it was a pleasant rather than painful feeling. Tiamat narrowed her eyes at the three dragons. I'll be right back. After saying those words, Tiamat disappeared from Issei's sight, making the chestnut blink in shock at the sheer speed the dragoness had. When he turned around, he could see how she came flying with the three dragons clinging to her snout. It would be comical if Tiamat wasn't suffocating them with her suffocating grip. Tiamat landed in front of Issei and threw the three dragons to the ground like a sack of potatoes. The dragons quickly got up, fearful of what might happen. Who was it that did this to you? Tiamat asked in a calm tone, making the atmosphere even more tense. Issei looked down at his wound, then back up at Tiamat. It was the two biggest dragons. But I think it was some kind of misunderstanding. Tiamat gave the two larger dragons a piercing look with a glint in her eyes that indicated pain. Well. The dragons quickly began to explain themselves with strange sounds and moans, something Issei didn't understand at all. Though Tiamat's case was completely different as she had a hand on her chin as she nodded from time to time, indicating that she understood their language. Tiamat crossed her arms under her breast seriously. I see, so they thought Issei had somehow kidnapped their son to make them both leave this territory and leave it to him. The two dragons nodded several times frantically as Issei watched all this with great amazement. Tiamat watched the little dragon as she began to speak cheerfully, then began to circle around Issei with the same glee. Tiamat put a hand to her chin, and her apathetic expression changed to a small smile as she turned her gaze to Issei. I see, so you saved her, and thanks to that they were able to clear up the misunderstanding. That's great, because that means now you won't have to worry about getting through this place without other dragons attacking you again, since dragon territories cover a lot of miles. Issei blinked in confusion at this statement. Wait, then how come you can live here if it's not your territory? Tiamat looked at the two older dragons, causing them to start sweating a little. Because they know very well that it is not in their best interest to take me on. Tiamat stated with a mischievous grin on her face. Tiamat returned to her typical apathetic expression as she watched the three dragons. Well, considering it was all a misunderstanding, I guess I won't do anything to them. Tiamat turned away and placed a hand on her waist. What's more, I'll even let them come this way because I see that your daughter became good friends with Issei. Issei watched with a big smile at the little dragon as she continued to circle around him. That means I found a familiar. At these words, the little dragon stopped dead in her tracks and looked at him carefully. Issei clenched his fist tightly with a defiant smile. With our strength, I'm sure Issei received a strong attack of fire, causing his entire face to go black. He opened his eyes with a dazed expression on his face as he spat smoke from his mouth. The little dragon was just watching him in triumph. Greg began to guffaw at this, while Tiamat lowered her head and shook her head in disappointment. You have the aura of a dragon. You can't ask another dragon to be your familiar. It's like you're insulting it. Tiamat stated, then looked at Issei's face, causing her worried look to return to her face. Are you okay? Issei directed a smile at Tiamat for her great concern towards him, causing the dragoness to reciprocate with a slight smile. Line jump. It was already a little late, the dragons had left the place, leaving only Tiamat and Issei in the cave. They were both sitting near the campfire while the chestnut was telling her a story about his two best friends. The funny thing about this is that Mitsuda and Motohama had to turn to me in order to save themselves from the wrath of the Kendo women. Issei shook his head at the end at the attitude of his friends as he shared the blankets with Tiamat. The dragoness would only increase her smile and force a little, leaning a little more on Issei's shoulder. Why are you like this? Issei looked at Tiamat in confusion. Like what? Tiamat opened her eyes and raised her gaze to look him in the face. You're cool. Issei blinked in confusion at her statement. Cool? He was sure no one had ever paid him that kind of compliment before. Tiamat lowered her gaze again and rested her face on Issei's chest, causing the brown-haired man to be a little surprised. I don't understand it very well either. I just think you're great because you make me feel great. In just these 2 days, I've felt so much better than I have in hundreds of years. That wasn't really a hard thing to accomplish, considering she'd lived alone for a millennium, but it was a subject Issei didn't want to remind her of. Issei rubbed her hair with a small blush of embarrassment. Well, you just needed someone to understand you a little, don't you think? Issei lowered his gaze somewhat in disgust to see Tiamat frown at his words. I think you were unlucky. Tiamat raised her gaze with a frown, bumping her nose against Issei's. Bad luck. If I just needed someone to understand me, why did it take me so long to show up? Tiamat flashed a beautiful smile at Issei, managing to make the protagonist look surprised. To my mind, cool people are unique. Considering it took you so long to show up, you're someone unique. Tiamat lowered her face again to lay on Issei's chest, hugging him deeply. You're great. Issei reciprocated the hug with great surprise at Tiamat's words. Simply put, I did what anyone would have done. If it were as you say, you wouldn't be unique to me. Therefore, you would not be great. Nor would you make me feel great. Thanks, I guess. A small blush appeared on Issei's face, feeling Tiamat cling a little tighter to her body. You must be really cold. Line jumped. Issei and Tiamat were drinking a juice they had made last night, using the water bottles that the brown man had brought as a container. They were both sitting on the already somewhat dirty blanket. We should stick to a bath today. Tiamat commented as she looked down at herself to see that her hands were somewhat dirty. Yes. We also need to take the opportunity to clean our clothes and stuff. Issei added with a bored expression. Tiamat looked at him with slightly widened eyes. Can't you materialize clothes with your magic? My magic reserves are almost nil. A depressive aura surrounded Issei after saying those words. Tiamat looked out of the cave somewhat surprised by the revelation. Oh, I understand. That might be a problem if you want to become stronger. Issei looked at Tiamat quizzically at what she mentioned. The dragoness just looked at him seriously. If your magic reserves are almost nil, you can only rely on melee combat or with bladed weapons. Honestly, I have no idea what the undeveloped lizard can do, nor do I care to know. But if you really want to become stronger, you should improve your fitness and technique. Greg grumbled under his breath due to the fact that it had been a long time since he had been called that way and for a moment he had thought she had forgotten. Issei directed a smile at him as he clenched his fist. I've already been practicing my physical condition. Though lately I've been a bit stuck with my progress. He added the last somewhat embarrassed. Tiamat moved a little closer to Issei and began to touch the muscles in his arms, getting the young man to blush a little. I can see you've been training hard. But there's no use increasing your power if you lack technique. Tiamat stopped touching him and rested her knees on the ground very close to him. Being the security, sooner or later you will become powerful. But that also means you will face powerful opponents, and believe me, they will indeed have good technique and combat experience that will crush you instantly. Issei lowered his head, dejected by the revelation. So, how can I improve my technique and power at the same time? I've already asked the president, but she doesn't know how to help me. She only told me that I should improve my physical condition even more to have special training. Tiamat gave a small derisive snort. That girl is just like you, she has no experience whatsoever in really dangerous combat. Although, I must say she's right about one thing. I can see that your physical condition is not good, but not bad either. You have to keep improving that aspect, and there will come a time when your body will be able to withstand the power of the sacred gear much better. But it is not convenient that you only exercise, you should also enter into friendly combats against other people who can teach you new techniques. Tiamat pointed to herself with a proud smile. Like me. Issei blinked in shock. Does that mean? After the bath, I'll teach you a thing or two. Tiamat interrupted him with a small smile as she nodded. Follow me. I know just the place. Tiamat got up from the ground, being followed by Issei, who was gathering all his things to wash them. As Issei gathered his things, he gave Tiamat a curious look. Or rather, at what she looked like. The dragoness stood at the edge of the cave, so the wind made her hair wave in a majestic way. She always had that serious expression that didn't ruin her beauty, along with her beautiful face and knockout body. Why are you looking at me so much? Tiamat asked with a raised eyebrow. Issei just looked away, embarrassed by the previous thoughts. I was just wondering how someone as young as you could fall in love with Drake. I mean, Drake was physically 40 years old at the time, and you're much younger than that. Tiamat looked down and folded her arms seriously. I don't know why it happened, I just fell in love with him. I guess there's no such thing as age difference when it comes to love. Tiamat turned around and started to walk away, being followed by Issei. When I fell in love with him, I had barely turned 21 years old. Now, it's been a little over 1,000 years since then. Although it was a long time ago, my physical appearance is still 25 years old, just like back then. Thanks for watching this video. Part 2 is now over. If you like this video, please subscribe and like this video. I hope I see you in the next video.